Hello, everyone. Dr. Yonit Arthur here. You are on the Steady Coach, and no intro is going to do justice to just how awesome this interview is. You are watching or listening to part one of a two-part interview with Vanessa Blackstone, who is a certified social worker, a psychotherapist who specializes in helping people with chronic, medically unexplained physical symptoms, who is the executive director at the Pain Psychology Center, who is a trainer in pain reprocessing therapy, and who also recovered from vestibular migraine. And in part one of this interview, we're going to hear Vanessa's story. Vanessa's migraines began when she was 11 years old, and she suffered from vestibular symptoms all the way through her mid-20s. So she's here to tell you all about what she had to do to recover and the lessons she learned from it here in part one of this interview. I cried through various parts of this interview. I'm sure you will too. And for those of you who are here on my channel and have been asking the question, can people get better even when they've had symptoms for a long time? Vanessa is here to provide you with a resounding yes. And if you like content like this, please ask a question or leave a comment. Please like, share, subscribe to my channel if you're here on YouTube, or if you're listening to this as a podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star review and following the podcast. All of these things help me reach more people. Please enjoy my conversation with Vanessa and be sure to come back for part two. Links will be posted to that in the video description on YouTube or in the podcast description. All right, Vanessa, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I am very excited to hear your story. You've got a great story here about your experience with neural circuit dizziness, as I call it. So before we get into your story, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are so people have a sense of you?
Absolutely. My name is Vanessa, as we know. I'm the executive director of the Pain Psychology Center that's located here in Los Angeles. I've lived here in LA since I started undergrad, which is probably when my symptoms were at their worst. But I just love kind of sharing a little bit about my experiences with a variety of hurdles in life. It's kind of a passion of mine to share personal experiences and connect it back to the work that I do. So I know we're in a really good spot for that.
Amen. And what a special place for you to share it, because people who've never had dizziness don't tend to understand dizziness very well.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you're going to be able to talk about it. And this will be a two-part interview. So in part one, we're going to be talking more about exactly what you just said, your personal experiences. And in part two, we're going to come back and we're going to talk all about the work that you do now and how this relates to dizziness.
Perfect.
So, okay. So you already referenced it, but let's start chronologically. So when did the symptoms start and how did they start?
Yeah, I started having symptoms when I was 11, actually. It started happening right before menstruation. And it's interesting, when I started experiencing a lot of the migraine, vestibular symptoms, a lot of aura migraine symptoms that I had, it was kind of like, oh, yep, it was time for you, because most of the women in my family have these symptoms. So it's a little bit more expected and conditioned, and something that I've observed other people having for the course of my life. I remember pretty early on, like, knowing that when we came into my grandmother's house, and if my grandpa kind of did like a shush notion, it was telling everyone without telling everyone that, your Nana has a migraine and she's taking a nap, so we got to keep it down. And so when I started getting them, it was almost felt like a rite of passage in a way, which is so weird to say. But yeah, I started experiencing some of the more heavy migraine symptoms when I was 11, and then they really started increasing into the aura and the vestibular symptoms once I hit puberty and menstruation.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So do you remember when the vestibular symptoms really kicked up a notch, what that was like?
I was sitting in class, actually, and
How
I was
old?
looking, I believe I was 12 or 13.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And I just remember sitting in class after having some sort of an apple in my lunch for the day. And I can't remember what class I was in, but I just remember sitting at my desk and suddenly tasting like the apple taste all of a sudden, but with nausea. It was like it popped back up from my stomach and just the essence of it was in my mouth. And then I was looking at the board and I just remember the board kind of like doing this a
Mm.
little bit. And my teacher was writing on the board. And the more that they wrote, the dizzier that I got. And I just remember putting my head down on the desk and I got yelled at because I put my head down. And it's like, Vanessa, what are you doing? It's like, I don't know. Like, I just kind of sunk into this like place of panic, not being sure what was going on. And I started crying. And my best friend, who's still my best friend to this day, Elisa, she looked at me and she's like, okay. And I just remember my eyes just started watering and I said no, and I had to go to the bathroom and the teacher was like, where are you going? And I didn't say anything and I just left the classroom, went to the bathroom, got sick, called my grandmother, came to pick me up, and we kind of talked about like why I felt so sick and what happened. And I was just telling her that I just got really dizzy and we were sitting at home and then all of a sudden got hit with the migraine. And my grandmother was like, yep, that's how I get them. You get the dizziness and you feel nauseous first and then you get hit. And from then on out, those symptoms matched up with a migraine and lasted from anywhere to like 3 to 5 days. So that was just my routine after that. Once a month around menstruation, got hit with vestibular symptoms and then a migraine. Was
For
always
days.
sick for days. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you mind going a little into some more detail about what kinds of symptoms? I know this is a very detailed question, but people here really need to hear what it was like for you because they feel like they're alone in what they're going through.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So my symptoms always started with a hint of nausea that I could almost taste, and then started slowly creeping into what I like to describe as like the wah 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 feeling, where the world turns into this like wah 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 kind of place. Everything's vibrating and everything's moving. Like nothing is still in this place. Even the slightest movement that I used to make, I remember it felt like it had this lingering after effect, like this ongoing sensation where I would move and the movement felt like it was still going, even though I wasn't going. And as soon as all of those things would kick in, I knew because my brain was just conditioned out of fear that great, this is leading to X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to be unwell for the next like 3 to 5 days. So I would always kind of gear up for that. But in the beginning, it was kind of this slow nausea followed by like the wah, wah, wah feeling. That would last for like an hour almost. And then I started getting this slow creeping in sensation of not being able to use my eyes fully, where I would have to kind of like half mask them a little bit in order to filter in the light that was coming through. Because the more light that came through, the dizzier and more nauseous that I got. After about another hour of like heightened light sensitivity and sound sensitivity and smell sensitivity, that's when this really deep orb feeling in the center of my brain started happening, where it just kind of would slowly orb with pain, where it would amplify all the other dysregulating symptoms of the dizziness and of the nausea. And that slow orb of pain was the migraine building up. But this is kind of how it would gradually increase, and just little things that I found around along the way by just being used to it that I would almost like prepare for. That was my cue to like stop eating, to leave class, or to not drive and have to call someone to pick me up, or to take a medication, or to take my hair down, or take my earrings out. Anything that I felt was like putting pressure here up, I would make sure to try to remove it and kind of down regulate as much as possible. But at the same time was internally preparing for this like really big hit of that orb pain sensation and then pain for the next 3 to 5 days. And when I get these symptoms, the dizziness is so prevalent in terms of like, even if I'm in full blown migraine mode, again, that like lingering sensation of something still moving when it's not. I just remember like if I so much as sat up, I would have to sit. It's like so vivid, even as I talk about it. I would sit up to go be sick or go to the bathroom after a day into a migraine. But if I sat up, I had to wait. And I would wait with my shoulders high. And I would sit there at the edge of my bed and just close my eyes and wait for the lingering moving symptom to stop so that I felt like I had permission to actually walk. And every step kind of felt like I was like internally stepping on foam. Like I knew that I was stepping on solid ground, but in my body, I felt like I was stepping on foam constantly. Like it never stopped moving. It wasn't until like maybe the last day or two. No, actually, take that back. The last day of a migraine where the movement stopped and I felt like I could solidly get back to life, even if my head was still hurting. But the constant movement, feeling like I was on a boat in the middle of the kind of like rocky ocean with no land nearby, that lingered for days throughout the kind of like beginning of the migraine.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, thank you for being willing to revisit
Mm-hmm.
those sensations with me. I know you've been recovered for a long time now. And so, I can hear from your description how etched in it has been for you, or it was for you to experience that. And I know it's not a pleasant place to be. So thank you for being willing to go into so much detail about it. Thank you. That's going to mean a lot to people watching. I'm just hearing this and I'm thinking, you were a teenager. What was your life like? Like, so 3 to 5 days every month, you were completely debilitated. What was life like for you?
Yeah. I fit the mold of that type A person who has no chill, who doesn't know how to just take the foot off of the gas pedal and go, I don't feel good. Like maybe I'm going to take a few days off. I am the definition of an incredibly skilled power througher. I think I have a degree in powering through. I think I've studied it in length. I'm the oldest sibling. I'm actually the oldest of 7, but in my household, my mom had 4 kids, so I'm the oldest of those in that household, but overall the oldest of 7. And you know, our home was pretty chaotic. I share about my experiences a lot through other speaking opportunities, and I've learned that there's so much strength and power in like sharing stories like these. So that's I'd like to preface that as I'm going into it. I was removed from the home and put in foster care during my teen years, but early on things were pretty chaotic. So for me, powering through and just getting through it was kind of the MO. I was miserable. I remember so many times like hanging out with friends and literally having to step away and go throw up because it was just building up and building up. And I was trying to be social and interact. And like I really wanted to be there. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to be sick at home. I had a lot of friends, parents who were actually the ones taking care of me a lot of the times. If I wasn't feeling good, they would do things for me at their home so that I could kind of rest and reset, but I still wanted to be with them. And I think they knew that. So I'm good at powering through. I'm really good at pushing through. It's just how I am and how I'm wired. And it's what probably has helped me survive in many ways. So it's interesting because on the outside, it looked like I had this really like social life and like I wasn't really debilitated, but I was like dying inside all the time. I didn't want to go home. It wasn't safe to be home. It wasn't safe to be in my body. It kind of felt like there was a lot of dead ends that I was hitting in terms of like trying to find a place that felt calm. The place that I felt the most calm was my grandparents' home. I would see them probably every weekend. We lived with them in and out of childhood, but it wasn't until, it's interesting, like it wasn't until we almost no longer had the chaotic home environment until everything imploded because I was so used to pushing through the chaos and surviving in a household that was really unsafe that when we are eventually removed, it's almost like sitting in safety and having everything be calm and quiet was the worst thing for me. And I didn't know how to deal with it. So at that point in time, when I was about 15, 16, that's when you started seeing that I was debilitated by the migraines. That's when I was having to ask to be called out of school. That's when I was not really like engaging socially in the way that I was used to. I was trying to make it feel better with sports. I played the worst sport for vestibular symptoms. I played rugby for 8 years.
Wow.
Talk about powering through.
Oh,
I'm like, if I can
wow.
just hammer through this symptom, I think I'll be okay.
Wow.
And obviously it didn't work.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. I know.
Wow.
I know. Really rough
Wow.
sport to play with dizzy and migraine symptoms.
Second, maybe to racquetball. I mean, yeah, maybe. Wow. Wow, Vanessa. I'm just I have not yet heard your whole story, so hearing
Yeah.
this is flooring me. I mean, just flooring me hearing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. It's a
Wow.
lot. Even when I say it out loud, I'm aware. I'm like, geez, I wish I had a message somewhere that was like, hey, it's okay to not have to fight constantly, you know? You don't
Yeah.
have to fight. Not everything has to be a push and a shove and a constant need to like barrel through someone or something. Like it's okay. But I really didn't know that. That felt like the most kind of reassuring sense of safety that I had at the time, that if I can just barrel through everything, I'll be fine. And eventually that kind of caught up to me, which led to like other parts of my story that I really didn't know how to just be. I was like doubling down on the barreling through for so long that my brain eventually was like, we're going to make it impossible for you to barrel through. We're going to make it so that you literally can't focus, can't do anything, feel helpless. And it wasn't until that point where I finally learned, like, oh no, I think it's the way that I'm doing things. It took a
Okay.
long time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that makes me wonder. So once things started getting bad, so you said right around 15,
Mhm.
16, things are getting bad. Um, not to nitpick on symptoms, but I know again, this is important for people to hear.
Yeah.
Did the symptoms then start like spreading out so it was happening for longer, or was it still kind of in that 5-day span every month when they were occurring?
Around 15, 16, it got longer, but only stuck within the period of menstruation. It was
Mhm.
just a thing. Like everybody kind of knew in my small circle, like, oh, I get hit really hard with menstrual symptoms.
Mhm.
And that means migraine and feeling really dizzy and getting sick and being in a lot of other kinds of pain.
Mhm.
But probably the moment that I graduate, graduated high school and was in more of like an independent place of my life, that's when they just completely scattered. Probably around the time of 17 and 18,
Mhm.
all over the place. Was no longer matched up with menstrual cycle, was completely unpredictable. Um, and when I went into my first semester of community college, I think it was my first semester, my first couple of weeks. I was 17 and I was sitting in some class. And again, I don't know if this is a theme here. I just realized if it's a fruit thing, I don't know. But I remember eating a pear, and it's so vivid. And I was eating a pear, and again, I had just finished the pear, but I was sitting in class, wasn't menstruating, wasn't even close to it, and all of a sudden was doing the, why do I taste
Mhm.
this more? And I was just sitting there, and the vestibular symptoms hit. Everything was wah, wah, wah. Everything was moving. The chair that I was sitting in didn't feel very sturdy anymore. I could feel temperatures just slowly change from a neutral sensation to a nice, deep, hot feeling. At this point, I had grabbed my backpack and got out of class. I don't even think I said anything. I think I just left. And I went to my car and I lived about 20, 25 minutes from school. I grew up in kind of like a rural area where everything's a little bit more spread out. So 20, 25 minutes means 25 miles. In LA, it means 4 miles, but
Right.
yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But I got into my car and I had a manual car. I had a little Volkswagen stick shift. And I just remember being in the car and I'm trying to shift into like second or third gear and I started grinding it because I wasn't getting it right. And it's because my eyes were closed and I was driving and I opened my eyes. And right when I opened my eyes, everything was like a negative image. It was like overly bright and like overly contrasted. And I pulled over and I could taste the pear so much more now. I got out of the car, I went down this embankment, and I literally got on all fours, like hands and knees. And I'm sitting there and I like cradled my bottom down into the back of my calves and my feet. And I just started sobbing. And I'm like hyperventilating, I'm sobbing, I can't see. I start becoming sick. I ended up getting back to my car and calling a friend whose boyfriend drove her out to this highway that I was off the side of, Highway 1. She got out, she got in my car and drove me back to my home where I actually lived alone because I had emancipated. So I lived independently on my own at 17 off in the middle of nowhere. And she was kind enough to drive me back to my place. And I don't even think I went back to school the rest of the week because I was just out. And I just remember feeling so sad. All the blinds were drawn. I'm in this cute little studio that was mine that I was really excited to be in. I was excited to be living independently, and I just felt so like emotionally and physically debilitated, like that I couldn't even enjoy my first semester of college. And of course, there are other things going on in my life that were really hard to feel safe with. I was still dealing with a complete lack of boundaries with the relationship with my mom and really ridden by the stress and the guilt of not being in the home with my mom and my younger siblings to take care of them anymore. I felt like I abandoned everybody and was like being selfish, trying to kind of live my own life. But I just remember sitting there feeling so alone, the blinds drawn, it's so dark. I had school. I was so stressed out. I was hungry, but I couldn't muster up the energy to eat, and just laying in the small little studio in the middle of nowhere and just feeling so defeated. And at that moment, that was when the migraines and the vestibular symptoms took a completely different like timeline course. No longer were they 100% matched up with menstruation.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I'm just so moved by this story. I hear from so many people going through these symptoms, and just imagining you as again just a teenager dealing with this on your own. My heart is just in my stomach right now. Wow. Okay, so when did you decide to get this checked out medically? Like,
Mm-hmm.
was that early on or around that time when you got forced to do that? What did that look like?
I finally started looking into this
Mhm.
because there was some speculation that some of my family members had about worsening symptoms because of the sport of rugby and like something happening to my spine and I need to go to a chiropractor. And I just remember my family like getting really worried about like maybe there's something wrong with your brain or maybe there's something wrong with your back or your neck, or there was some type of like emphasis around it. And so I really I personally didn't have a drive to want to go that route, but there was so much pressure from everyone else that kind of started freaking me out. And I was like, maybe I should see. I almost like radically accepted that I'm just going to have to deal with this and have Excedrin in my backpack for the rest of my life. And I just, I don't know, embracing it. I don't know if that's the right word, but I had some push from other people. And so I started going down the route of like sharing the information with medical providers. I had just like a general practitioner that I shared the information with. I started seeing a chiropractor. I started seeing, I can't remember what their exact title is, but I remember I saw someone that worked specifically, a physician, with migraines and headaches. And I just kind of started seeing if there was some other option that I can have. I remember the first person that I saw, I was prescribed Maxalt. And then the chiropractor that I saw, I still have the scan at my grandparents' house, actually, where they showed me the scan that the disc in my back was 827% to the right. And I was like, oh, what? That must be it. But then it didn't make sense because I was like, but I've had my migraine since, like, all these symptoms since I was 11, like way before rugby. But I was kind of willing to try anything because at this point I was getting so many different types of feedback that it was scaring me of like, gosh, maybe there's something really wrong with my body and I need to figure it out and maybe that'll make it feel more manageable. Man, I wish I hadn't gone to the chiropractor because that led to a long journey of the constant chiropractor visits, massage visits, and then eventually that led to like that being the only thing that provided any relief outside of taking
Oh,
Excedrin.
wow.
Yeah, I tried Maxalt for a long time and it just didn't do much. And I don't, I think it's a little bit of how I'm raised. I'm Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian member, and my family is still very much so connected to, finding other ways to resolve things, finding a lot of like holistic avenues. And so I've always been a little bit more geared to that and found a lot more comfort in that. And I've tried the other avenues, but it didn't feel like it budged enough for me to keep using it. But there was something about someone going in and touching my body that felt so cared for. But then at the same time, it was the only thing that helped. Like if I had someone massage my neck enough or do a scalp massage or pop my back enough, I felt like I could breathe. I felt like it relieved something. Now when I look back, I can see that it was like a good amount of permission to get from someone else that says like I don't have to carry this all by myself, that someone was going to help me release it and I didn't have to do it all. Like now that I look back, I realize that I just needed to feel cared for. Like I needed to not have to do it all by myself. And by having someone else come in and actually physically touch my body in this way, it was almost an example of that. Like you're not alone, you don't have to do it by yourself. But then it became almost too dependent to the point where I couldn't go too long without it before I needed it again. And then I was stuck in this cycle of symptoms, have to go get manually manipulated. Symptoms, manual, symptoms, manual. And it just became the new kind of habit.
And it sounds like it wasn't really preventing symptoms. You were still having very high intensity symptoms anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost just like a little Band-Aid. But the overall diagnosis that I was given were a few of them, that I had vestibular migraines, aura migraines, that I had migraines, like menstrual migraines around hormones. Then there was always the kind of suggestion of like, well, maybe you're just stressed. And for me, that was always such a funny thing. I'm like, I literally grew up in trauma. So like, if that's your explanation, I'm not really sure where I fit into that. Cause like, oh yeah, it's just a stressful event. Like, no, I was like forcibly removed from the home, like in childhood. So it was always an interesting thing, like the just stress. I'm like, I don't know what that sounds like for me. I don't know what that looks like. Like, that doesn't really apply to me. And I was so confused by that for a lot of reasons. So I could include the stress component, but I wasn't sure because of my life experiences how that explained my symptoms.
So when did that perception change? How did we finally get through to you, Vanessa? The stress was a factor here.
Totally, absolutely. Oh man, it was in grad school. I had some pretty rough symptoms throughout undergrad, but nothing that changed from what I was used to before. It was kind of the same. And I'm a fighter, I'm a survivor. So I was like, whatever, we'll just adapt and we'll just deal with the fact that we feel super unwell during these moments. And this is what it looks like. I had no problem like telling everyone. I had good friends in undergrad that I would tell, like, if I have to leave class, can you take notes for me? Because that'll happen. I'll go lay in my car. I did that a lot of backseat naps in undergrad, and really good friends that took notes for me, which was a relief. But grad school was the breaking point. Like it was no longer like, okay, whatever. I clashed with myself hardcore in grad school. Grad school was when so many other symptoms evolved. It's interesting, like on a foundational level, migraines and these vestibular symptoms are just what I've always been used to. But as soon as in came other symptoms, heightened pelvic floor pain, worsening neck pain, IBS. I started getting like really, I had already had this issue probably around the age of 19, but I was getting hives on my body when I would get really hot. And I would break out in hives if I got some of my migraine symptoms or if I overexerted myself. But grad school, it was like I was getting hives just like sitting in class. And they would get worse the moment that I recognized that my neck started hurting. And then I would start getting dizzy and I would be in this whirlwind of symptoms. And then my pelvic floor would start hurting. And then I'd start having IBS symptoms and I'd have to get up and leave the classroom. Once all of those symptoms came into play, it's almost like my brain was like, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to make it worse. Like I'm making it a lot worse. And then you're really going to have to do something different.
Yeah.
This was such a rough time because I had more access to certain levels of healthcare during the kind of implosion of all of these symptoms, where I had more access to be able to be prescribed more and do more and figure out more. So grad school was a mix of going to the doctor a lot, and I had a 4.0. I was the president of the Honor Society. I landed
Of course you were.
Of course. I landed the best internship that you can land in your second year. And I was just like thriving on the academic front. I worked full time. I was real busy, but on the other side of things, I was making space for all of these ways in which I could finally fix this so that I could keep doing things at the pace that I was doing. I think at this point in grad school, I had been prescribed maybe 15 different kinds of birth control from the time I was 15 to at that age, just to see if something worked for both pelvic floor pain and migraines. Because there was a lot of like suggestion that if I took the right birth control, that it could really help my menstrual migraines. But then when it broke out of the menstruation cycle, it became tricky. But in grad school, that was when it was at its worst. And I had actually applied to a PhD program. And when my aha moment, I had all my sashes. I had like a cord for my GPA. I had my sash for my president honor, my honor society role. I had a sash for something else. I had a medallion. I had all these things. And I just remember sitting in my chair at graduation, looking down at it all and being like, I just want to get this over with. I just want to get this over with because once I get into a PhD program, then it'll be enough. Like then I'll have made it. And I could not see that all these things were so incredible. And I was sitting there and I was looking down and I just remember realizing like, this is not good. I don't think this is a good thing. I don't think that I should be feeling this way. I think there's something wrong. Like what is happening? Why do I feel so bad during such a happy time? And I'm miserable. I just want to get this day over with so I can get on to the next thing. Mm. And after that, I called my grandfather, who's an academic. He's my mentor. And I just kind of spilled my guts and was just sobbing. And I was like, I don't think I can do this. And he was like, yeah, I don't think that you need to. It's like, if that's how you're going into a PhD program, like it's not going to be what you want it to be. And it's okay to not do it. And when he said that, I was like, really? Because I really didn't want to disappoint him. But it's so funny because he's not someone that can be disappointed, truly, when it comes to me and my sister. And he just said, like, it's fine. You've done more than enough. Like, focus on yourself. Take a break. See what you want to do. The worst that I ever felt in my entire life was when I had graduated and I decided to defer. And I was sitting on my couch watching The Office, which is like quiet, awkward humor, you know, and was just sitting on my couch. My partner was asleep and I was sitting there and I had nothing to do. I had no internship, no program to prepare for, no program that I was currently in, no work because I didn't look for work because I was planning on going to the PhD program. And all of a sudden, I just like felt this painful stillness and I had a panic attack. I had the worst panic attack I've ever had. I was so dizzy. I was hysterical. I honestly don't even fully remember everything that happened in that moment. I just remember my partner coming out of the room and asking me like, what is going on? And I was just hysterical of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm going to do. He just reassured me, like, it's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. You just graduated. And in that process of trying to find what I wanted to do, I learned about the work that I do now. And that's what led me here, was like this huge implosion of symptoms with nothing on my schedule. And that was the moment that it like broke through.
Wow. Oh my gosh, so much to unpack there. It makes me realize, I think I talk about this a lot now, thankfully, but if people get to me, they've sometimes managed to not have the implosion yet. They're having a crisis because of symptoms. But I think sometimes there's a kind of a confusion between cause and effect. Like the symptoms are causing my implosion. Whereas it's really, I think it's a two-way street. There's an implosion causing the symptoms, and the symptoms are causing the implosion. They're causing each other. And so for you, it took the like coming to the precipice to actually realize that's what was happening. Wow.
I mean, stubborn.
Yeah, I was about to say, oh my gosh, you are stubborn. I mean, to have gone that long. I mean, so from 11 to mid 20s going through this all the time, like multiple times per month at some point with that level of symptoms, like it's just, you are so stubborn. Oh my gosh. Hats off to you. I mean, it's impressive.
I don't know if it's a good thing, but I hear you.
Yeah. And thank you again. Just you're telling this story with so much insight. I mean, I can see the work you've put into making sense of this and healing from this. So it's just such a delight to hear how the story sounds now versus how it would have sounded probably, if we had talked about it 10 years ago. This would have been a very different story.
Yeah. So
why don't you tell me just a little bit, we're going to go into a little more detail about this in part 2, but just on your end, this is a big question now. What got you better? Like what was the process like? What did you have to do?
Yeah, what got me better? That's a big question. I think what got me better is really just recognizing that like I'm allowed to take care of myself. I mean, if there was a message in the beginning that gave me permission, it was that, you are allowed to stop. You don't have to do more to be more. And I learned that slowly. I'm still learning it. But that message of like, gosh, I don't have to do more to be more. Like the things that I've done are enough, and I can kind of slow down a little bit. And then when I practiced that in my own work, in my own life, before trying to figure out like what it is that I actually wanted to do, I learned about the work that I do now from my previous supervisor through my last year internship at Kaiser.
Which, just to be clear, let's just spell that out for folks since they may not hear the second part of the interview. So what do you do now, just kind of in short?
Yeah. What I do now is I am a clinician within the modality of pain reprocessing therapy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that is, for those who are less familiar with this work, that is a cutting edge type of therapy. It has the word pain in the title, which we are going to address. But pain reprocessing therapy is a modality that's evidence-based and has been shown to be very effective in helping people not just manage, recover from chronic physical symptoms. And it's been studied primarily in the context of pain. But again, as Vanessa here can tell us, it is not just for pain.
Absolutely. And that was actually my exact journey in this. When I first started the work professionally, not personally, I felt maybe in some areas I can relate to this, but not all areas, because I don't have the kind of pain that they're talking about. But it wasn't until I learned it more when I was like, dang it. This is me. This is me. I see myself in my clients. I see myself in the work, and realizing more and more that I actually align with this, even though my symptoms are more of what I like to call sensory symptoms.
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah.
started finding creative ways to utilize the work of pain reprocessing therapy for those with sensory symptoms, for myself and for others, using my story to help relate to clients and know how to use this work creatively with their symptoms, and just really integrating this work within that set of symptoms, because it can be really complicated to use the structure of certain modalities with symptoms that are a little bit more, I don't know, the best word that's coming to mind is wonky, right? Like it's not clear all the time. It
It's a
doesn't
little
look the same.
abstract. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mhm,
Yeah. It's not
mhm.
like this hurts,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of off, but then it's only like, and that and the lighting and it's
Mhm.
like things are it's more it sounds more neurological, like it's more like
Mhm.
something wrong
Yeah,
in my head rather
yeah,
than something specific in my body.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
remember
yeah.
leading a client through the work one time, and their pain was pretty clear and like in one part of the body and pretty concrete. And I remember using this work with them, and they were like, "Wow, it's going down as we're doing this." Really? I was like, Are you, are you sure? Like, it just felt so
Wow.
strange for me to go like, wow, how, like, I don't know if I could do that for the vestibular symptoms. But then again, it's like, oh no, it's just about being creative and utilizing the same perspective, utilizing the same approach, meeting something that's a little bit more abstract, but in a way that feels like it actually aligns with you. And so when I
Mhm.
was doing this work professionally, I was also doing this work personally. So that kind of was a fun imposter syndrome place to
I
be.
was about to
Yeah.
say.
Mhm.
So you were actively healing yourself while
Mhm.
also helping clients
Mhm.
heal them, and you were also a trainee at this point too,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Wow.
Mhm.
That is some
Yeah,
impressive stuff you
yeah,
were doing.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Did
yeah.
you ever work with a therapist? Did you ever work with a therapist actually? Now that
Mhm.
I don't think I've asked that question.
Yeah, yeah. So the reason that I actually became a therapist was because a part of the process of having to be placed back in our home with my mom eventually, was the requirement was to go to therapy, everyone. And so I saw this therapist who called everyone out on their crap and was very direct, but also warm to the people that needed to be validated. And I learned how to set boundaries from her. And I was like, gosh, how do you do this? And I realized more and more like this is actually interesting. So I started therapy when I was 17, and I've been in therapy ever since. So I still have my therapist. I was supposed to see him today, but I'll see him tomorrow. So I still have my my therapist, and
Mhm.
that's it's a really big part of my self care. It's a place where I find the most permission to just be vulnerable, but without the fear component of vulnerability. It feels so good to be vulnerable there. So
Mhm.
yes, I am in therapy and
Mhm.
was in therapy while a trainee at the Pain Psychology Center. Um, and kind of even provided my therapist a lot of the information that I was learning here so that I knew how to integrate it in our work together.
That was gonna be my next question, and this is something also for people to take note of because there aren't enough mind body therapists to go around, and
Right.
we'll talk about what options people do have in part 2 of the interview, but, um, the point is, armed with a lot of this information, with a good, attuned, open-minded therapist, people can do a lot of the work on their own. They don't necessarily need to see someone who has a complete specialization in helping people with chronic pain or chronic dizziness or chronic symptoms.
Mhm. Yeah. The people that I find needing the one-on-one support, the people that are utilizing the things that they know are really useful, but they're getting stuck, and there's
Yeah.
something getting stuck. And they're like,
Mhm.
I just need someone else's perspective to help me get unstuck from this place. And that's what we do here at the Pain Psychology Center. But
Mhm.
there is definitely the ability to guide yourself through the work, absorb the knowledge. If you find yourself getting stuck or needing that little extra something, that's where the help of another perspective can be really useful.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, and we will get into that a little bit more, I promise, folks. But to wrap up your story, Vanessa, can you once you did the work, can you give me a sense of if the process was linear? like you just got better and that was it. Um, so first, let's start there. Was the process linear?
No.
Because people are like, one of the comments I get, no one in your recovery interviews ever talks about the ups and downs and how brutal they are. So could you touch on that?
Brutal. One time I was in a session with a client who was expressing currently having very similar symptoms to what I experienced, like to a T, and even had some similar traumatic experiences that I could relate to. And I don't know what happened to this day. All I know is that this person was talking, and it's like someone moved my lamp and put it right here, and I could not see this client anymore. The light was fully in my face. They were in a place of heavy emotion and processing, and I just hit a wall. And I started doing the work that I know to do. I started doing, which I know we can go more into, like I started doing somatic tracking. I started trying to regulate, and it just got worse. The vestibular symptoms hit, the wah, 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 the vibrato of my computer screen. And in a frenzy, while in session, I texted Alan Gordon, who is our founder, and I was like, I need to talk to you after session. I'm in a session. He's like, okay, I have a meeting after this. Is it an emergency? I'm like, yes, you need to be late for that meeting. I need to talk to you. Got out of the session, called Alan, and just started sobbing, and was like, I failed. This happened, and I'm freaking out to him, and he's very comforting and kind of grounded me with some few little tidbits of, like, it sounded like you tried something in a moment of intensity, and maybe that's why the exercise didn't work, because you were like trying to make it work so that you could focus again. And that sounds a little bit like your MO, and it didn't work because that doesn't work for you anymore. And we talked about something that I've now created a foundation with. I have like actually steps that I use because of this call with my clients with the experience a lot of these vestibular or migraine symptoms. From that call with Alan, I learned that a state of preoccupation was not helping me, that I need to have realistic safety messages that work for me, not I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, but something that actually is relatable to me, because I wasn't safe in that moment. I need to make some light changes and explore worst case scenario. And those are my steps that I utilize with my clients that I remembered in that moment that was really useful, because Alan was like, what were you supposed to do after this session? I'm like, I was supposed to go on a hike, and now I can't because I'm going to get sick. And I was like, but like if you were on a hike and you threw up, what's worst case scenario? You throw up outside? That's not that bad. Like, you're right. I could just totally puke on a hiking trail in LA and I'd be just fine. And it's like, yeah, your partner will be with you so you can sit down and take it easy. I'm like, okay. I would typically hunker down in this dark room and start to feel worse, but maybe we'll take it easy. If we get to the park, I don't have to go on the hike. We can turn around. Ended up going on the hike. At some point on the hike, I don't even remember when the vestibular stopped. I just remember getting to the end of the hike and being like, oh wow, I actually feel better. I'm tired, I'm run down, but I don't feel dizzy and my head doesn't hurt anymore. That's really weird. And just kind of move forward. And I definitely have had extinction bursts from there. My selling point with this work to clients was like, I've been symptom free for 4 years up until June of this summer, but I learned so much from it that's been more healing to me than the 4 years without symptoms.
Yes. And I was going to go there next. So there was this precipitous up and down process. You got to the point where you were just totally symptom free, 4 years symptom free. And then you had this experience, which I would love for you to go into. I know we only have just a couple minutes left, but please, if you wouldn't mind sharing what happened and some of the insights you got.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. It was the most insightful experience of the entire time that I've been doing this work, truthfully. I went to my hometown with a really good friend of mine that I went to grad school with. So excited to show her my hometown, and had planned a bunch of stuff for us, of course, on a day. Yeah, of course. It's supposed to be fun. No, we have a schedule.
Down to like the 5 minute, in 5-minute increments, right?
Literally, yeah. I had so much going on with work, but I was like, no, you're allowed to take breaks. It's okay. Took a break and locked us out. The first thing I did was lock us out of my car and the guest house of my grandparents' house that we were staying at. I didn't mean to. I just kind of was in a frenzy of getting us in the car and getting us going. And I put my keys to the house and the car in the trunk and closed the trunk. And I was like, oh, no. And my dogs and myself and my friend were all outside waiting to start our day. And my friend is so type B. So type B. Her name is Cole. She's just the sweetest angel ever, but she's so type B and she means well. But when Cole is like, it's fine, we can just sit on the patio and hang out, I'm like, if you don't shut up, freak out. She's like, it's okay, we can hang out on the patio. And because my partner can unlock my car remotely, and so I was like, he's not going to be awake at 8 a.m. like he's going to be a while. And she's like, it's fine. We're sitting there. Cole's doing lunges. She's stretching. She's like, do you want to do lunges with me? I'm like, no. Sitting there with my hood down, irritated as all hell, so mad. And then all of a sudden, I kind of look up from my hood and I was like, oh no. Either I am getting symptoms of a vestibular migraine, or I looked at the sun for too long. And I was like, you looked at the sun for too long. It's fine. You're good. Just kind of like rest and reset, close your eyes, sit back, let your body rest. Half an hour goes by and partner unlocked the car. And right when I got in the car, I was like, oh yeah, this is a full-blown episode. I can feel all the steps that I mentioned earlier kind of starting to creep in. The taste, and because I hadn't eaten anything, all that I tasted was like a really strong taste of like water, if that makes sense, right? Just like that mouth-watering feeling. The dizziness is setting in, the slow, like orbing head pounding, all the things. And I'm the only one that can drive my car. My friend doesn't know how to drive it. And I was supposed to kind of, taxi us around for this like hometown tour. I was so frustrated. She kept telling me like, it's going to be fine. Like we can just go to the creek. We don't have to do a whole hike. And it's like, okay, fine, go to the creek. It's getting worse. Light sensitivity is hitting. Everything's moving. My dogs are just having the time of their life, but I am just like slowly in a place of despair. I was like, if we just eat, maybe if I eat, I'll feel better. We go to this restaurant, and the moment that we ordered the food, I could not have felt worse, because now suddenly I felt trapped by the food having been ordered and having to wait for the food. And the restaurant was so loud and busy. And there was the clinking of like coffee cups and plates, and the lights are like a weird color, or so I thought, and just all the different smells and just the noises and this wood chair that I'm sitting in. I remember just kind of like slowly lowering my gaze and just trying to like get through it. And my friend suddenly said, Cole, she was like, we can get the food to go. As soon as she said that, I started crying. And she was like, oh my God, she's like, you can go sit in the car. It's fine. And okay, got up, went and took a pain nap. When you're sleeping, but you're in pain the whole time and you know that you're in pain. Pain naps are like staple for me. It's like, you know what that means when you've been in pain before. So I took a pain nap. Everything's dizzy and wah, wah, wah-ing in the car. Cole finally gets in. 10 minutes later, we drive up to the house. I'm like, gosh, I just need to eat and like reset, and then we can go. And she suddenly said, she's like, stop. You stop taking care of me. I'm fine. I'm happy reading my book on the patio. Like I told you I was fine from the beginning. I'm fine. This place is beautiful. We don't need to go run around. I'm good taking it easy. Stop taking care of me. You don't have to worry about me. And when she said that, it all clicked. I was like, oh, I'm doing the thing. I'm doing all the things that I do usually. I'm doing the Vanessa thing. Got it. I'm going to take a nap. I don't know how long, and then we'll see. Took an hour and a half nap. It's like, oh, that was nice, but I still need a reset before I eat. Took a shower. So much better to be able to eat. It like reset my body sensation so that I could like eat and not get sick. Ate lightly. That's nice. Rested a little bit. Cole and I were like, how about we drive to the beach? She's like, yes, but only if we wear comfy clothes, no cute clothes, only comfy. And that's how we're going to the beach. We're taking it easy. Got it. We drove to the beach. I got some sparkling water. Everything was kind of low key, no big deal. Didn't do the big day that I had pushed us to do. Went to bed early. I woke up the next day and I was telling my associate director, who is my work wife, her name is Giovanna. I told Gio this story about what happened. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I woke up realizing not once did I think about having to cancel my whole week, because that's what I've done in the past. I have to cancel my whole week. I can't work because I'm going to be out. Not once did I worry about what caused it. I knew that I kind of pushed us a little bit, and I knew that I had a lot going on, but I never included that in the equation. My past narrative was always like, maybe I'm doing too much. Maybe I can't handle this. Maybe I'm burnt out. I would always try to find what the cause was. Not once did I worry about the future, worry about what caused it. Not once did I try to figure out how to make this go away. I was just frustrated. I didn't feel good. So of course I'm going to be like, kind of in a place of upset. That's fine. But I didn't use it as a weapon. I just kind of met myself where I was at every step of the way. And especially when I had that like safe reminder from such a loving person that was like, stop, we're fine. Everything's good. That like clicked me into this place. I was telling Gio this in our conversation, and she was like, was the 4 years without symptoms healing, or was that moment healing, where you realized that you could handle this extinction burst with an entirely new perspective, to the point where you woke up the next day and felt like 95% better and didn't have to cancel your whole week and felt like you got through it. And something that I had forgotten was that I had a graduation to go to where I was going to see a lot of people that I've had to set a lot of boundaries with, and I haven't had to see them or talk to them in a long time. And I was really weary of it, but I didn't think about that once on the migraine and vestibular symptom day. Not once. I didn't think about it until that Monday, and I was like, I really don't want to go, but I went anyways. Not once did any of that come into mind. And when Gio asked me that question, I said that extinction burst was absolutely the healing day. I will take that over anything. I learned so much from that moment. I learned what I can handle. I learned what I need. I learned that I don't need to keep going if my brain is telling my body to stop. Like, it was so much that I learned from that day, that even from that, just from this past June, that happening, I've had clients ask me questions about my own process, or new clients ask me about my own perspective about how this is supposed to go. And that's the story that I share now. I let them know, yes, it was 4 years of being symptom-free, but this one is so much more valuable, because I think that gives me and other people like so much more empowerment of like, so I am capable of handling it in a way that actually meets my needs and meets me where I'm at, if it ever happens again. So that doesn't mean that it doesn't have to happen. That means if it happens, I have the wherewithal to be able to navigate it.
Navigate it in a day, like no big deal, like back to normal life the next day. Because people lose this perspective when they're going through something for good reason. When you feel cruddy for years on end, you're just like, I don't ever want to see another one of these sensations ever again in my life. But the fact is, before you had chronic symptoms, you had days when you didn't feel good. I can attest to that. I use myself sometimes as the baseline control. I'm like, I woke up feeling like crap today, or I had a headache today, or my back was really bothering me today. I mean, I walked the dog in the heat and I came back walking on a trampoline. I mean, there are days when I wake up in the morning and it's just not, I need to rest. I'm not feeling great. It is what it is. But people have a really hard time wrapping their heads around the idea that there are going to be days when you don't feel 100%, even though I would say, Vanessa, and you tell me if you see yourself this way, you're recovered. You are recovered. You're not a vestibular migrainer. You're not someone who has chronic vestibular migraines, but it's okay for the sensation to happen every now and again. If it looks like that, like who not who cares, but who cares?
Yeah, no, seriously. Absolutely. I absolutely see myself as a person that's recovered. I don't feel like this overarching theme of the vestibular migraines is the way that I need to live my life. And it's interesting because that shows up in moments like that. I even have this sticky note right here above my computer that says it's okay to not be okay. So what that tells me is, like, if I show up in a session and I'm tired, guess what we're going to be all session long? Tired. And guess what's okay to take care of and coddle and tend to and be nice to and be easy with? Be tired. If I wake up and I have a little bit of a headache coming on, which sometimes in the past has led to a panic and then increased vestibular symptoms, that's led to a full-blown migraine. What I do is, in that morning of like, oh, I have this headache, that means today, like, oh, I won't walk my dogs in the morning because I don't need to. I'll walk them later. I'll have some nice sparkling water. I'll light a nice candle or put my little fan on that feels nice to regulate my temperature. I'll dress comfortably, right? I'll be easy on myself. Like, I don't have to try super hard to like make myself well. I can meet myself where I'm at when I'm not well. And that every single time puts me in a position to be really comfortable when I'm uncomfortable. The phrase that I like to use with clients is, I'm trying to teach you how to be comfortably uncomfortable, because you can't be comfortable all the time.
Mm-mm.
But you can be uncomfortable and be comfortable when you're uncomfortable because of how you approach yourself and how your discomfort is.
Mm. I want to pick quotes out from there and like plaster them all over my wall also, Vanessa. This has just been tremendous. I I personally enjoyed the story so much, just hearing how it's marvelous. And anyone who's hearing this and say, yeah, but obviously she's incredible and there's no way I could do this. You can do this. And we're going to talk in the second part of this interview a little bit more about how. So make sure you tune back in for that. Of course, if you enjoyed this interview, please please share, please subscribe to my channel. This helps me reach more people. Please drop comments or questions below. And Vanessa, thank you so, so much for your time today. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
All right.